He did it in front of customers, pulled the glass door wide, pointed at the parking lot and said, "You don't belong here, old man." The chrome handle was cold in my palm, and the October air in Dallas felt colder. My son-in-law, Tyler, stood under the blue and white banner of Marshall Ford like he owned the sky. I'm the one who signed the lease on that building in 2003. I'm the one whose retirement is tied to every car that rolls off this lot. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. "Keys," Tyler said, palm out like a cop. "Showroom access is for staff only." It was a Tuesday, October 7th, just after 10. I had come to drop off a manila envelope for accounting. The September rent statement, $18,750 due, with the late fee circled in red. My name, Marshall Holdings, was typed across the top, and the check copy was clipped behind it. I raised the envelope like a white flag. "You're 30 days behind," I said quietly. Customers drifted around us, pretending to study window stickers. The service bell dinged. Somewhere, a coffee machine hissed and gave up. Tyler leaned closer, mint on his breath. "We don't answer to you, not anymore." The way he looked at me, like an inconvenience, like a dented fender, made my stomach burn. 6 months earlier, I'd given my blessing when he took the general manager chair. "Family," my daughter Lauren said, squeezing my hand at Easter. "He'll treat your legacy right." I kept the title to the land and building, the way a farmer keeps the deed while the boys run the tractors. That was my pension. That was supposed to be safe. He hooked his thumb toward the exit, eyes sliding past the big glass office where a man in a navy suit watched us. Mr. Delgado, the regional VP for the manufacturer, Tyler's boss for all practical purposes. Delgado had a stack of files open, warranty audits most likely, and a black Mont Blanc he clicked when he was thinking. He knew my face. He'd sent me a Christmas basket once, back when respect was something you could hold. I said, "You're 30 days behind, and the lease says another 10 triggers a default. You know what that means?" My voice didn't carry. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted him to remember the paper we'd all signed. Tyler smiled like a salesman who already had the deposit. "What it means," he said, "is you're going to stop scaring customers." He reached for the envelope. I pulled it back. A woman at the reception desk glanced up and then away. The fluorescent lights hummed. A service tech rolled a tire past like a witness on wheels. I thought about the 2 binders in my truck. Monthly statements since 2003. Rent checks logged. Photocopies of every repair I'd paid for. The roof in 2009. The AC in 15. The lot reseal last summer. $22,440 on a card ending in 1047. I thought about the text Tyler sent me on September 12th. "Pushing rent to next week, cash flow issue. Appreciate your patience." I had screen captured it and printed it. The date underlined in blue ink. "I built this floor," I said, nodding at the polished concrete. "At the place where the afternoon sun makes a square, you can set your watch by. And I won't be talked to like a trespasser." Delgado stepped out of his glass office then, smooth as a judge taking the bench. "Morning, Mr. Marshall," he said, voice warm enough to thaw a window. Tyler blinked. "I didn't say anything." I didn't have to. The man who signed the factory allocations knew exactly who I was. Tyler's jaw worked, but the showroom had gone church quiet. I placed the envelope on the reception counter, tapped it once with my finger so the paper made that soft, certain sound, and turned toward the door. As it swung open, the wind lifted the banner ropes and made them snap. Behind me, Delgado said, "We'll talk in my office." Not we as in family. We as in people who understood contracts. In the parking lot, I sat in my F-150 and laid the second envelope on the passenger seat. A courtesy copy of the default notice drafted by my attorney, dated for Friday if the rent didn't clear. I stared at the signature line. I wasn't ready to pull it yet. Not yet. But I had learned something inside that glass box. Tyler wanted me gone because he was hiding something, and men who hide things always trip over paper. I texted Lauren. Stopped by the store. Everything okay? The bubbles popped up, then vanished. Silence. I started the truck. The engine a low promise. If I'd been kicked out of my own second home, I'd walk back in through the front door, with the truth in my pocket and the law at my shoulder. That night, I couldn't sleep. The dealership lights glared across the highway like a row of teeth. I sat at my kitchen table in Richardson, the rent ledgers spread out like an autopsy report. Each page whispered a promise broken. My wife's old mug, World's Okayest Golfer, sat beside me, half filled with cold coffee. She'd passed in 2018, but I still talk to her sometimes. You'd have told me to sell the place, I said. Take the pension. Buy a boat. But I couldn't. That building was my handshake with my father, my years under sun and grease. You don't sell your own signature. At 2:17 a.m., I scrolled through texts from my daughter. Her last message was 6 words. He's under a lot of pressure, Dad. No apology, no curiosity about why her husband had thrown me out like a stranger. I typed, "Pressure makes diamonds, not cowards," then deleted it. Instead, I opened the spreadsheet my accountant had emailed last week. Columns of payments, all green until August. September was blank. October glowed red, a $37,500 hole and counting. I shut the laptop and stared at the framed photo on the counter. Lauren, at 12, holding a trophy half her size. I could still smell the lemonade stand she ran that day. She'd begged me to buy her a second jug of sugar. "It's an investment, Daddy," she'd said, grinning. I used to think she understood value. Maybe she still did, just not the kind I raised her with. By morning, I drove to the strip mall behind the old post office where my attorney, Henry Lowell, kept his office. Henry's been with me since the 90s. Divorce, property disputes, one stubborn tax audit. He still wore 3-piece suits even when the rest of us gave up. His secretary brought me black coffee that tasted like motor oil. "You look like someone stole your engine block," Henry said. "Close," I replied. "They just called it family." I told him about the scene, every word, every look. He took notes with that brass pen of his and finally leaned back. "You still hold the property deed?" "Title and mortgage free," I said. "Then you've got leverage." "But if rent's delinquent, we start paper before emotion. Don't talk to him again without me." He slid a yellow pad toward me. At the top, he wrote, "Notice of default. Draft Friday, 10/10. "You'll deliver it if they don't pay," he said. "Until then, gather proof. Bank slips, statements, messages. Build the spine before you swing." I left his office feeling both heavier and lighter, like someone had handed me permission to breathe. Outside, the air smelled of rain and tire rubber. Across the street, a tow truck rattled by carrying a wrecked sedan. I couldn't help but see the metaphor. At home, I opened the spare room closet, the one I hadn't touched since Margaret's passing. Inside were 2 banker's boxes labeled dealership files. Each folder was a breadcrumb of the life I'd built: repair invoices, tax receipts, insurance renewals. Near the bottom, I found something that didn't belong. An email printout dated July 3rd, forwarded from Lauren's account to Tyler's. Subject: Lease Amendment Draft. My stomach dropped. The attachment summary read, "Option to purchase. Revised terms." I didn't remember signing any amendment. My name was typed at the bottom like a ghost's signature. I sat back hard. My own daughter had sent him my documents. My fingers trembled, not from age, but from insult. I opened my email archive and searched for the address of the drafting firm, Blake and Hunt Real Estate Law. Their letterhead popped up on the July electric bill because they shared a P.O. box. I dialed the number. "Blake and Hunt," a receptionist answered. "Did your office prepare a lease amendment for Marshall Holdings this summer?" I asked. Let me check. Yes, dated June 29th, signed electronically by, she paused, Harold Marshall and Tyler Benson. My voice cracked. Can you tell me the email used for that signature? I'm sorry, sir. Client privacy. Ma'am, I said softly, that's my name on your document. If there's fraud, you'll be subpoenaed. She hesitated, then whispered, Marshall Holdings, Jigmail, but the signature came from TyBensonMarshford.com. Looks like a mismatch. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the phone. My pulse hammered like a stuck valve. They hadn't just delayed rent, they were forging my consent to buy me out. At 6:00 p.m., I drove past the dealership. The showroom lights glowed gold behind tinted glass. Tyler's car, a silver Range Rover with vanity plates reading TBYLR, was parked by the side entrance. I watched him through the glass, laughing with a sales rep, his hand on her shoulder. My daughter was nowhere in sight. I pressed the phone against the steering wheel and recorded a short note to myself. Evidence 1. Lease amendment fraud. July 3rd. When I got home, the house felt smaller. I poured bourbon into a coffee mug, sat in the dark, and let the anger settle like dust. My late wife used to say, "Don't let betrayal choose your next move. Choose it yourself." That night, I started choosing. I printed the fake lease. I labeled a folder, Operation Clean Title. If they thought an old man wouldn't fight, they'd forgotten who built the lot they were standing on. By Thursday morning, the bourbon was gone, and so was any illusion that this would fix itself. The sun came through the blinds in slats, striping the dining table like caution tape. I'd spent half the night building folders, digital and paper, naming each one after the sins I suspected. Amendment fraud, missing rent, employee collusion. I wasn't a lawyer, but 40 years in auto sales teaches you paperwork is just another kind of engine. If you feed it the right fuel, it moves things. I started with the bank. At 9:02 a.m., I walked into First National on Campbell Road. The same branch manager, Denise, had handled my escrow for 15 years. "Mr. Marshall," she said, smiling. "Still keeping us honest?" "Trying," I said, handing her my business debit card. "I need printed records of deposits from Marshall Ford for August through October. The rental account." She keyed the numbers, frown deepening. August cleared on the 3rd, $1,750. September, nothing. October, nothing yet. "Can you flag any incoming wires with that routing number?" She nodded. "I'll set an alert. If anything posts, you'll know before I do." Outside, the air smelled like fall and asphalt. I bought a new spiral notebook from the drugstore next door and wrote the first entry in block letters. Thursday, October 9th. Bank confirms rent gap. Underneath, I taped the printed statement with a strip of blue painter's tape. No fancy binders this time. I wanted something raw, chronological, ready for a courtroom table. That afternoon, I drove to the dealership again, this time parking across the street behind the car wash. From there, I could see the service bays and Tyler's glass office. Through my binoculars, old Nikon 10X5Ds from my birdwatching days, I watched as a flatbed delivered 2 new F-150s. Tyler signed the receipt himself, grinning. "Cash flow problem, huh? A man behind on rent doesn't order inventory." At 3:15, I saw Lauren's white Lexus pull in. She got out fast, no wave, hair tied back like she'd come to lecture, not love. Tyler met her halfway. They argued near the service door. She pointed toward the showroom. He shook his head. She walked away first. Even from a distance, I could read her shoulders, guilt heavy enough to bend her spine. I wrote another note. Lauren complicit or coerced. Investigate quietly. That night, I called Henry again. "We've got forgery," I said, "and possibly a fraudulent conveyance attempt." "Then we move quietly," he replied. "You still have that lease PDF? I printed it." "Good. Forward me the email header metadata if you can. Prove sender mismatch." and Harold. Don't confront them yet. Let them hang themselves with their own paperwork. I smiled. You've always known my kind of patience. On Friday morning, a new envelope arrived by courier. No return address, just my name, typed neat. Inside was a single page. Notice to vacate. Premises, sale pending. The buyer's name was Benson Automotive, LLC. My son-in-law had created a shell company in his own name. And the kicker? The document referenced that same fraudulent amendment giving him purchase rights. I took a slow breath, then another. This wasn't just arrogance. It was theft under family cover. I drove straight to the county clerk's office downtown. The clerk, a woman named Ruby with purple glasses, looked up when I handed her the paper. You want a record search? She asked. Filed deeds or amendments for 4101 Preston Road, last 6 months, she typed. One document recorded July 8th, amendment to lease, granting right of first refusal to Benson Automotive, LLC. Witnessed by a notary, Lydia Chalmers. Can I see the signature page? She turned the monitor. There it was, my name in blue ink, scanned too perfect. I traced it with my finger. Margaret used to tease that my M always looked like a mountain. This one looked traced, mechanical. Can I get a certified copy? I asked. $10, worth every cent. I folded it into my notebook, added another entry. Friday, October 10th. Recorded forgery confirmed. By evening, I sat at my desk and laid everything out like chess pieces. Forged amendment, county certified. Email mismatch, firm confirmation. Rent gap, bank verified. Vacate notice, courier copy. Witness notary name, to trace. I wrote at the top of the page. Objective, expose fraud publicly, reclaim lease, and let Tyler implode under his own ego. But how? That's when I remembered Delgado, the regional VP who'd watched the scene in the showroom. Corporate men hate scandal more than they hate taxes. If I could show him the proof before Tyler knew, he'd do my work for me. So I called in a favor. One of my old sales managers, Rick Doyle, had left retail to work in factory compliance. I texted him. Need quiet chat about internal audit. Urgent. Coffee? He replied 2 minutes later. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., Café Monaco. That night, for the first time all week, I slept. Not well, but enough to dream of Margaret sitting on the dealership steps, smiling like she knew something I didn't. I woke up with her words still in my head. You built it once. You can rebuild the truth. I looked at the stack of folders on the table and thought, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I treated revenge like a mechanic treats a stubborn engine. Diagnose, isolate, and apply steady pressure until the part gives. Monday morning, October 13th, I walked into Café Monaco at 8:20 a.m. with my folder under my arm and a face that pretended to be tired, not determined. Rick Doyle slid into the booth opposite me, dark circles under his eyes but a quick smile that still hid 100 factory secrets. Harold, he said, you sounded serious. I am. I pushed the certified copy of the July amendment across the table, then a copy of the courier vacate notice. Rick's jaw tightened when he saw the notary name, Lydia Chalmers. You still on warranty and allocation? I asked. You know Delgado? He did. He'd been with the factory long enough to recognize how supply dollars moved. Delgado's itchy about compliance. If he smells a leak, he doesn't sleep. We traded small talk until the waitress brought coffee and left us alone with the steam. I told him what I'd found. The bank gaps, the forged signature, the courier, the shell company. Rick flipped through the papers like a man checking under a hood. You got metadata on that emailed signature? He asked. Blake and Hunt confirmed it came from TyBensonMarshford.com, not your Marshall Holdings AG mail, I said. And the county record shows a scan that looks traced, like someone scanned my old signature and pasted it. Rick rubbed his chin. Two paths. 1. Regulatory. We tip Delgado. He'll launch an audit and freeze allocations. 2. Administrative. I can pull Tyler's purchase orders and expense sheets if I can get into the regional portal. You want to burn a bridge to burn his business? No arson, I said. Just exposure. We're not criminals, just observers in a bad play. He nodded. I'll call Delgado. Quietly. I owe you that. He slid me a business card with his factory email crossed out and his personal cell written beneath. If I can get him to look before Tyler does, corporate will yank allocations. No inventory, no sales. It chokes a dealership. We left the cafe with a plan. Rick would contact Delgado under the pretense of a routine allocation question. I would assemble a packet, paper and digital, clean enough that corporate lawyers wouldn't need a microscope to see the fraud. If corporate moved, Tyler would panic. Men who panic make mistakes. Back home, I dug deeper. I called the notary's office and got an answering service. I peppered them with questions until they put me in touch with Lydia Chalmers's cell. She was a retired schoolteacher who notarized on weekends for extra money. Her voice was polite, then guarded. Mr. Marshall, I notarized a few pages in July for Tyler. He brought them in with his ID. Did you witness Harold Marshall sign? I asked. My throat tightened. Did you see him physically sign a paper? No, sir. He didn't. Tyler said he had a power of attorney. That power of attorney, I cut in. Did you see it? Was it dated? She hesitated. It had a date of June 30th. I just notarized the signature page. Tyler assured me everything was in order. Her voice wavered like a used pencil. He seemed nervous. That was a word that would carry weight in a sworn statement. I drove to Blake and Hunt and asked to see Mr. Hunt. The receptionist frowned when I said my name, but the firm's junior associate, a man named Patel, led me to a glass-walled conference room and opened the original email header. The signature request was sent from an internal template, but the signer's IP address points to a workstation registered to Marshallford Sales. Patel's eyebrows climbed. That's not Marshall Holdings' domain. Can you prepare an affidavit about the sender IP and header? I asked. If you can show corporate and the county a mismatch, that'll blow the amendment out of the water. We'll need a retainer, Patel said. I handed over a check, $1,500, for an expedited header analysis and affidavit. Dollars pushed the next step forward. It was what my accountant called investing in truth. Over the next 2 days, I methodically built the packet, certified county copy, Blake and Hunt header affidavit, bank statements with the red October gap, the courier vacate notice, and a sworn statement from Lydia that she notarized without witnessing my signature. I numbered each page and put sticky notes where Delgado's legal team would look first. The header, the county record, the notary admission. Then I set traps that weren't traps at all. Just reasonable calls that would ring alarm bells on their own. I phoned Benson Automotive LLC, listed at a mail drop on the west side, and asked if anyone there could confirm a purchase agreement. The woman who answered claimed to be the office manager and hung up when I asked for the LLC's operating agreement. I left a voicemail on tybensonmarshford.com requesting confirmation of purchase funds. I made sure the request used language that corporate IT logs would flag as administrative. Please confirm source of funds and wire instructions for Benson Automotive. LLC. Copy to Regional Compliance. Rick. Called Delgado at 2:30 p.m. We've got a discrepancy in allocation. Paperwork. Possible document chain issue. You'd want to see this, right? Delgado, who loved order as much as profit, replied instantly, Bring it to me. Rick scheduled a meeting for the next morning. That night, I slept with the stack of evidence on the kitchen table like a person sleeping between two pillows. My hands were steady now. I felt the old wiring of stubbornness and integrity hum alive. I wasn't out for blood. I was out for balance. Men who rob family of truth smell proud, not ashamed. They don't last long when the light gets switched on. If Delgado pulled inventory, Tyler would have to explain why Benson Automotive LLC was listed as a buyer before any funds cleared. If employees were complicit, someone would talk under pressure. If Lauren knew, she might have to choose between a husband and her father. That was a fork in the road I hoped she'd take. The pieces were set. The engine was warmed. All I had to do now was make sure corporate reached for the starter. When Delgado asked for the packet, Tyler's smile finally had a crack in it. It was Tuesday, October 14th, 8 in the morning, and the showroom felt different, like a church before confession. Rick walked in with my folder under his arm, and Delgado clicked his pen the way men click when they want to sound calm. I sat in the reception area pretending to read a brochure, but I heard everything. The soft, legal language, the way Delgado repeated the word discrepancy like a metronome. We need to verify chain of title and signature authenticity before any allocations move forward, he said. Translation: no new shipments, no new plates, no new cars if the papers don't check out. Tyler heard that too. I watched him from the corner of my eye as if I were watching the weather change. He tried to keep his face still, but his hands kept betraying him. Fiddling with a key fob, tapping the counter, checking the showroom door. He'd ordered 2 F-150s on Monday. They were still on the lot because allocations were now in a holding pattern. The truck delivery invoice, $86,400 for the pair, sat on a desk in accounting like a time bomb. By noon, employees began to talk. Quiet at first. Fragments near the coffee machine. Did you hear about the amendment? I thought Mr. Marshall signed it. Then louder. If allocations get pulled, my commission for October, gone. I knew the math. 1 payroll cycle without inventory, and the books look bad. Tyler's bravado was a thin coat over a man who'd been counting on momentum. Meanwhile, my packet had begun to perform the way paperwork always does. It told the truth in black and white. Patel from Blake & Hunt emailed the affidavit at 9:45 a.m. Sender IP mismatch, header anomalies, and a note confirming the signature request originated from a workstation registered to Marshallford Sales, net, the dealership domain, not from Marshall Holdings Agmail. Lydia Chalmers's sworn statement arrived at 11:12 a.m., short and brittle. She notarized without witnessing my hand, relying on a power of attorney Tyler claimed to have. The county-certified copy showed the July 8th recording. My bank flagged a 0.00 wire in September, where rent should have appeared, and Denise at First National had set an alert to ping me if anything hit that routing. Number Delgado read each page with the patience of a person who knows bureaucracy will do the heavy lifting if you hand it the right lever. We will open an internal compliance review, he said. It will include allocation holds and an audit of recent document filings. That language was a guillotine for a dealer who'd built momentum on trust. Tyler came at me after the meeting, fury thin as a razor. He didn't speak so much as spit. What do you want, Harold? You want me to fail? His voice trembled, with a man who already felt the floor slipping. You're messing with the business. My family? He jabbed the word family like it was a shield. You started with a document that wasn't yours, I said. I want the truth out. That's it. My voice was low. I kept my hands in my pockets because I didn't want to give him any excuse to say I'd threatened him. He laughed, sharp and brittle. You and your paperwork. You think paper beats people? He leaned so close I could smell the coffee on his breath. You'd better watch the books you keep. Then he stalked away, leaving a trail of salesmen looking like they'd seen the weather change too. That afternoon, Lauren called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. Dad, can we talk? Can you come by after work? And then nothing but a clipped sigh. I left a text. Meet me Saturday. We need to clear this up. No yelling. She replied with a single blue tick. Her silence tugged like a thread. I didn't want to pull too hard yet. By Wednesday, the pressure on Tyler became visible. The parts manager asked for expense reports from August through October and flagged several vendor invoices that listed Benson Automotive LLC as a reseller. One invoice caught my eye. September 21st, $12,900 for accessory kits, paid by check number ending 6701. If Benson was a shell, who cashed that check? I made a note. Trace check 6701. Deposit, bank, location. Then came the small, terrible mistake that would matter later. Tyler, in a hurry, forwarded an internal email to a used car lot across town. The email was casual. Hold the allocation until Benson wires funds. Don't leak to corporate. And he used his dealership account. I happened to get a copy from a sympathetic service manager who'd been burned by Tyler's promises and kept everything in case. He handed it to me like a confession in an envelope. People break in ordinary ways. A forwarded note, a shaky voice, forgetfulness. Those ordinary fractures add up to pattern. Delgado now had pattern, and pattern is what auditors feed on. That night I updated my continuity ledger. Amendment, county. Header affidavit, Blake and Hunt. Lydia's sworn note, bank gap. Courier vacate. Forwarded internal email, Tyler's own hand. I underlined each item and wrote next to them in thick black marker. File suit if corporate doesn't act. Oct 20. Foreshadowing the set piece felt less like prediction and more like geometry. Draw the lines and the intersection. The courtroom appears. If corporate didn't move fast enough, I would. Hidalgo County's court calendar had openings the week after next. Public hearings, sworn testimony, discovery. Things that unbutton lies. I slept badly that night, but the tremor in my hands had steadied into something harder. Resolve. Tyler paced and prepped, players on both sides folding their hands like cards. Lauren's silence whispered of a choice. The room for irony was opening, and when it did, it would be wide enough for everything to fall through. I wasn't out for revenge that felt good. I was out to make the truth loud enough that it could not be ignored. Friday morning, October 17th, the sky over Dallas was the color of brushed steel. I drove to the dealership early, knowing Delgado's audit team would arrive by 9. The air outside the showroom hummed with tension, service techs whispering, salesmen avoiding eye contact. I'd been invisible here for months. Now even the janitor looked at me like I carried a subpoena. At 8:45, 2 factory sedans rolled into the lot. Delgado stepped out first, suit immaculate, followed by a woman in a gray blazer who carried a legal pad and moved like a metronome. Corporate compliance, her badge read. Tyler came out a moment later, jaw tight, smile plastered on. "Morning, gentlemen," he said, extending a hand Delgado didn't take. "Can I ask what this is about?" Delgado's voice was even. "Routine verification of dealership documentation. Mr. Marshall, you'll want to join us." That was the moment Tyler's expression froze, like someone just spotted a ghost that looked too familiar. We filed into the conference room. The same glass walls that had once reflected my humiliation now became his. The compliance officer opened a folder thick with printed emails and invoices. She clicked a pen. "Mr. Benson, can you confirm this signature?" She slid the forged amendment across the table. Tyler picked it up, buying time. "That's our original lease amendment?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Because our forensic analysis shows the signature originated from a workstation under your domain credentials. The notary, Mrs. Chalmers, has testified she never witnessed Mr. Marshall sign. You also cited a power of attorney that doesn't exist. Can you explain that?" He stammered something about miscommunication, about clerical error. Delgado watched him the way a judge watches a defendant decide whether to lie or confess. I said nothing. I just laid my notebook open, page after page of dated entries, blue tape, and receipts. "This is my record," I said quietly. "Every check, every text, every promise." Delgado leaned forward. Mr. Benson, corporate policy requires accurate disclosure in lease agreements. Fraudulent filings void your dealer status. Until this is resolved, allocations are suspended, and the manufacturer assumes control of inventory. Tyler's voice cracked. You can't do that. You need my signature. Delgado's tone went glacial. No, we need his. He nodded toward me. The silence that followed was clean, surgical. You could hear the clock ticking and the faint hiss of the HVAC. Lauren appeared in the doorway, pale, eyes rimmed red. Tyler, she whispered, what did you do? He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled back. I trusted you with my father's name, she said. You turned it into a pawn ticket. Delgado stood. We'll need your cooperation, Mr. Benson. Legal will contact you by Monday. Mr. Marshall, we'll request your statement for our records. The meeting dissolved into rustling papers and shallow breaths. Outside, the showroom had gone silent. Word traveled fast. Employees pretending to polish cars now watched as security escorted Tyler from his office. He tried to keep his shoulders square, but pride doesn't walk well when it's been broken at the knees. I stepped out into the sunlight. For a moment, everything was still. The banners barely moving, the air heavy with that electric calm that follows a storm. Delgado shook my hand. You built something honest, he said. We'll make sure it stays that way. As I walked to my truck, I passed Lauren near the entrance. She looked smaller than I remembered. Dad, she said softly, I didn't know about the forgery. He told me you'd agreed. I know, I said. People show you who they are when the paper hits the table. The rest is noise, she nodded, tears shining in her eyes. What happens now? Now, I said. We let the truth do its work. I drove away slowly, watching the reflection of the dealership shrink in the rear-view mirror. The chrome sign that once carried our family name glinted under the sun like a medal that had finally found its rightful owner. By Monday morning, the story had already begun to spread beyond the showroom. Dallas is a big city, but car lots trade gossip faster than oil changes. Someone from the manufacturer's office leaked a line to the Automotive Register. Regional dealer faces corporate audit after lease dispute. They didn't name names, but anyone who'd ever worked under that blue and white banner knew who it meant. I read the headline over black coffee at my kitchen table. Margaret's photo sat beside the mug, sunlight catching the silver of the frame. We're getting there, love, I murmured. Paper did the heavy lifting. At 9:15, my attorney Henry called. His voice was half triumph, half warning. Corporate's legal department wants your statement in writing. Delgado's already freezing their accounts. But Harold, Tyler's lawyer, just filed a restraining request against you. Says you trespassed on dealership property last week. I laughed. He threw me out in front of witnesses, Henry. The cameras caught everything. I know, but it's what guilty men do. They throw smoke. He paused. You up for giving a deposition tomorrow? I was born ready to talk when I'm right. Before hanging up, I asked him, what happens to the property now? Corporate wants to renegotiate directly with you. They'll dissolve the lease with Benson Automotive, backdate rent, and give you a clean ledger. But I recommend you go through court first. Get a declaratory judgment to wipe the forged amendment off the record. After the call, I sat in silence. Years of working the trade floor had taught me to read tone more than words. Henry sounded satisfied, but cautious. Something about restraining request gnawed at me. I printed out every email, every photo, and the courthouse notice Delgado's office had sent confirming the fraud investigation. At noon, the phone rang again. Lauren. Dad, please don't go to court, she said, her voice trembling. He's losing everything. They're repossessing his demo car, freezing the accounts. We're getting eviction letters at the house. I kept my tone steady. That house was bought with stolen signatures, Lauren. He forged my name. You think I should let that stand because he's family? He said it was a mistake, that he just wanted to secure the dealership before corporate stepped in. I swallowed. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was fraud, and fraud comes with receipts. There was a long pause, the kind that hurts more than shouting. "Dad," she said finally, "what's going to happen to us?" I closed my eyes. "You'll be fine if you start over with the truth. It's heavy, but it travels clean." That night I met Henry at his office downtown. He laid a stack of papers on the table. Marshall Holdings versus Benson Automotive LLC. Petition for declaratory judgment. My name in bold at the top, his signature below. "We're filing at 8:01 a.m., he said. "We'll ask the judge to void the forged document, restore your lease, and award damages. Delgado's audit will provide supporting exhibits." I nodded, running my finger over the embossed seal. "Feels heavier than it looks." "Justice usually does," he said. The next morning, the courtroom smelled like polished wood and nerves. Tyler sat at the defendant's table, gray suit too tight, hands folded like a student before detention. Lauren was beside him, her face pale and unreadable. Behind them, a few dealership employees whispered as they entered. I took my seat quietly beside Henry, notebook in hand, every page a weapon made of paper. Judge Miller entered, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with reading glasses perched low. "We'll hear Marshall Holdings versus Benson Automotive LLC," she said, voice clear and dry as dust. Henry stood. "Your Honor, this case concerns the fraudulent use of my client's electronic signature on a lease amendment granting purchase rights to the defendant. We have affidavits from the originating law firm, the notary, and corporate compliance verifying forgery." The judge flipped through the folder. "Mr. Benson, do you dispute this evidence?" Tyler stood, his lawyer whispering something that probably sounded like, "Deny everything." "Your Honor," he said, voice trembling, "it was an honest error, an internal mix-up. I thought Mr. Marshall had approved it. We share the same family name. Things were rushed." The judge held up a hand. "Forgery is not an administrative error, Mr. Benson. It's a felony." He sank back down. Henry slid a printout of the email headers across to the clerk. "The law firm confirms the document was executed from the defendant's workstation. The notary admits she never witnessed Mr. Marshall's signature. The county has certified copies confirming improper filing. We ask for immediate rescission and damages equal to 3 months' unpaid rent." The judge nodded slowly. "Motion granted. Lease amendment void. Judgment for the plaintiff. $56,250 plus costs." Her gavel struck once, crisp as a starter pistol. Tyler's lawyer closed his briefcase without a word. Lauren stared down at her lap, fingers white around a tissue. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just looked at that gavel and thought of Margaret, how she used to say, "Karma has paperwork too." Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I wasn't interested in cameras, but one local paper caught me in passing and asked, "Mr. Marshall, any comment on the verdict?" I said the only thing that felt right. You don't lose family to revenge. You lose them to choices. By Friday, corporate issued an internal memo. Marshall Holdings property restored. Franchise under review. Tyler's dealership license was suspended pending criminal investigation. Delgado called me personally that evening. "We've appointed a temporary general manager. If you'd like to sit on the advisory board, it's yours." I smiled into the phone. Let's make sure integrity stays in inventory this time. That weekend, I drove past the dealership again. The lot was half empty, the blue and white banners still fluttering. I parked by the curb and watched the wind pick up a single sales flyer and carry it down the street, like the last piece of a storm moving on. I didn't hate Tyler. Not really. Hate's a weight that burns out your brakes. I pitied him, the way you pity a man who can't tell the difference between ambition and theft. When I got home, I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and opened my notebook one last time. On the final page, under all the receipts and notes, I wrote, "Justice isn't loud, it's patient." Then I closed it for good. The following week, the world slowed down. The phone stopped ringing, the adrenaline bled away, leaving a strange quiet that felt almost sacred. For the first time in months, I could walk through my own property without looking over my shoulder or counting documents in my mind. Delgado's team wrapped up the audit and sent a final letter. Corporate compliance concludes fraudulent activity. Marshall Holdings exonerated. Attached was a note from Delgado himself, handwritten in neat blue ink. Mr. Marshall, integrity is rare in this business. You reminded us what it looks like. I framed that letter beside my father's original lease from 2003, the one I'd kept in a fireproof box all these years. Paper against paper, proof that legacy can survive greed if you keep your hands steady long enough. Tyler's empire, if you could call it that, collapsed like wet cardboard. Corporate seized inventory, creditors called in loans, and the dealership sign that once read Marshall Ford was stripped bare, waiting for a new franchise name. His Range Rover disappeared from the parking lot, repossessed. He tried to spin the story on social media, blaming family interference and clerical sabotage, but people in this business know the smell of panic when it's fresh. Within a week, no one returned his calls. Lauren moved out of their house 2 days later. She came by mine with 2 suitcases and eyes that had forgotten how to meet mine. I made her tea in Margaret's old cup, the one with the hairline crack. "You were right," she whispered. "He lied to me about everything, even the house papers." I wanted to tell her I told you so, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "We all learn at the speed of pain." She nodded, tears slipping down. "I don't know where to start." "You start," I said, "by not looking back." I let her stay in the guest room for a while. We didn't talk much, but sometimes silence fixes more than speeches. She began helping me sort through old dealership files, shredding duplicates, archiving the rest. There was a quiet rhythm to it, the kind that turns hurt into order. Henry filed the final notice of judgment satisfaction on my behalf. The county clerk stamped it with a crisp seal. Case closed. I remember running my thumb across that raised circle, the way you might trace a scar that healed clean. Justice doesn't always announce itself in grand gestures. Sometimes it's a quiet envelope arriving on a Tuesday afternoon, reminding you that truth, when tended like an old engine, still starts on the first turn. That night, I drove back to the lot one last time. The sign was gone, the windows dark. I stood at the edge of the asphalt and looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw a man older than he used to be, but steadier. One who'd lost illusions, not values. The lights of downtown glowed in the distance, quiet and sure. As I turned to leave, I thought of Margaret again, how she'd always said that doing the right thing costs less if you pay in time instead of regret. I whispered into the cool air. "You were right again, sweetheart." Then I got in my truck and drove home. The dashboard clock read 9:46 p.m. I didn't feel victory. I felt balance, and in that balance, something close to peace. Justice isn't about winning, I said later, recording the last note in my ledger. It's about restoring what should have never been taken. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let the house settle around me. The war was over, and for the first time in years, I could finally sleep without paper under my pillow. 6 months later, spring rolled across Dallas and turned everything green again. The kind of green that hides what winter did. I still drove by the old dealership every so often, mostly out of habit. The sign now read, Cedar Valley Motors. New paint. New people. Same polished floors I poured concrete for 20 years ago. Funny thing about legacy. It doesn't need your name to prove you built it. Lauren found a small apartment downtown and started taking night classes in accounting. She said she wanted to understand numbers the way you do. I helped her move, carried boxes labeled kitchen, memories, and regret. On her new desk sat the photo of Margaret holding her as a child, the same one that used to hang in my office. "Keep it," I told her. "It'll remind you what good looks like." We talked more easily now. The space between us had turned from blame to quiet gratitude. Every so often she'd ask how I was sleeping, and I'd tell her the truth. Like a man who finally finished his paperwork. Henry retired in April. He came by the house one last time, brought me a bottle of bourbon with a note taped to it. For when you forget why patience matters. We sat on the porch, listening to cicadas start their evening choir. He said, "You know, Harold, not many people see justice in their own lifetime. You should feel lucky." I nodded. "I don't feel lucky, Henry. I feel even," he smiled. "That's rarer." The court's judgment turned into more than money. It became a lesson. Corporate reinstated my property under a new lease, this time with a clause I wrote myself. No subletting without notarized physical presence. I made sure of that. The rent comes steady now from the new franchise. I don't need the income. I need the peace of watching it arrive on time. Every Sunday, I walk through White Rock Park with an old thermos of coffee and watch the boats drift across the lake. Sometimes I see fathers teaching their kids to fish, or young couples arguing over whose turn it is to row. Life keeps moving forward, indifferent but honest. And that's all I ever wanted from people, too. Honesty. One afternoon, I got a letter from Delgado. He'd been promoted to regional director. At the bottom, he'd scrawled, "Still quoting your line in meetings. Paper beats pride." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Maybe that's what legacy really is. Someone else remembering your quiet truth long after the noise fades. As for Tyler, word was he moved to Arizona, trying to start a consulting business. I don't hate him. I stopped carrying that kind of weight. You can't rebuild your life while staring at the wreckage behind you. I keep the ledger in a drawer now, the one I filled with every receipt, note, and affidavit. Sometimes, when the night gets too still, I take it out and thumb through the pages. The ink has faded a little, but the story stays sharp. I think of all the men like me, quiet, careful, underestimated, who learned too late that trust without proof is charity. Margaret used to say, "Fairness isn't found, it's maintained." I finally understand what she meant. Justice isn't a single strike of a gavel. It's the slow, steady work of defending what you built. I closed the notebook one last time and whispered to the empty room, "You didn't lose me, Tyler. You gave me away." Then I turned off the lamp, let the hum of the night settle in, and sat there for a long while, grateful not for the victory, but for the peace that followed it. A full year later, the paper dust had settled, and life found its rhythm again. The dealership was under new ownership, my property taxes were current, and my blood pressure was finally normal. I'd stopped checking the mailbox, expecting bad news. Now, the only things that came were utility bills, a few letters from Lauren, and the occasional coupon for tires I didn't need. The house felt different, quieter, but not empty. Margaret's garden had started blooming again after I finally cleared the weeds. Every morning, I'd water the roses she planted years ago, thinking about how roots, once set deep enough, don't care about storms. Maybe that's what this whole year had been, a storm testing what I'd planted. One afternoon in late May, I was at the hardware store buying paint for the porch rail when I heard my name. It was Rick Doyle, the factory man who'd quietly tipped off Delgado a year ago. He still wore that half-crooked smile. "Harold, you old fox," he said. "You know they still talk about your case up in corporate meetings?" I laughed. "Let them. I just wanted my name back, not fame." Rick leaned closer. "Delgado says your story made them rewrite the compliance manual." "Good," I said. "Maybe it'll save the next fool some trouble." That night, I sat on my porch watching the sun drop behind the oaks. Lauren called. She sounded lighter. "Dad, I passed my CPA exam," she said. "And I'm starting a job at an accounting firm in June." I smiled into the phone. "So, you'll be the one checking signatures now?" She laughed. "Guess I learned from the best." It wasn't forgiveness we shared that night. It was something quieter, steadier. We both understood that rebuilding trust isn't about pretending the cracks never happened. It's about making sure the foundation is stronger next time. Around the same time, I got a small envelope in the mail from an address in Tucson. No return name. Inside was a folded check for $2,000 and a note. "I owe you more than this. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." No flourish, no excuse. I didn't cash it. I tucked it into the back of my ledger, under the last page. Some debts aren't meant to be repaid in dollars. Summer rolled in heavy and warm. I spent my days fixing the fence, helping neighbors with their old trucks, and keeping my coffee strong and simple. Sometimes people at the diner would mention the dealership case like it was a local legend. "That old guy who beat the system." I'd just smile and change the subject. The truth didn't need a headline anymore. In August, I drove out to the lake again. The air smelled like rain, the water calm as glass. I took the ledger from the glove box, the one that had carried the whole story, and set it on the passenger seat. "You did your job," I said softly. Then I rolled down the window, let the breeze flip through its pages one last time, and placed it back in the box, where it belonged, silent and complete. Life after revenge isn't grand. It's ordinary. The difference is, ordinary starts to feel sacred when you've fought for it. I watched the sunset dissolve into gold and shadow, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to record it. Because some truths, once proven, don't need retelling. I started the truck, turned up the radio to an old country song Margaret loved, and drove home slow. It was a Tuesday morning in September when I saw him again. I was at the county clerk's office renewing the property tax exemption for veterans. Routine paperwork, nothing dramatic. The kind of errand that keeps a man's life orderly. I was signing the last page when the clerk looked up and said, "Next!" And there he was, Tyler. He looked thinner, older, like time had sanded him down. No suit, no smile, just a man holding a folder too tight. He didn't see me at first. His hair was shorter, the confidence gone. The clerk asked his name, and when he said, "Tyler Benson," the sound of it hit me like a ghost walking through a familiar room. I stayed quiet. He stepped forward, explaining that he needed to register a new business. Benson Detailing and Mobile Wash. Not a dealership. Not a title company. Just soap and buckets and a van. Probably second-hand. When he finally turned and noticed me, his face froze, then softened into something that almost looked like shame. He took a step closer, clutching that folder like it was his last piece of armor. "Mr. Marshall," he said quietly, "didn't expect to see you here." I met his eyes. Worlds smaller than we think. For a moment, we stood there in the kind of silence that carries everything words can't. Then he said, "I just wanted you to know. I'm trying to start over." No tricks, just honest work. I studied him. His voice had none of that salesman polish anymore. Just gravel. "Good," I said. "Honest work builds slower, but it lasts." He nodded once, then looked at the floor. "You were right," he said. "Paper beats pride." Then he turned and walked out. No swagger, no bitterness, just a man finally understanding the cost of shortcuts. I finished my paperwork and stepped outside into the crisp September light. Across the street, I saw a man washing a pickup, the water hose curling like a silver ribbon under the sun. For a second, I thought of Tyler again, how sometimes the universe doesn't punish, it educates. When I got home, Lauren was on the porch, waving a stack of mail. "Dad, look, corporate sent the final payout on the damages. They closed the case for good." She smiled. A real smile this time, one that didn't hide anything. "We did it." "No," I said, taking the envelope and sliding it into my pocket. We just finished what was already right. That night, I sat on the back porch with my bourbon, watching the dusk turn the yard gold. The cicadas were loud but not unpleasant. I thought about how revenge had started like a flame, sharp, hungry, and ended like light through glass, steady, quiet, clear. I realized the real irony wasn't that Tyler lost everything. It was that I gained back something I'd forgotten. My peace, the kind you can only earn when you stop needing applause. Before heading inside, I opened the old ledger one last time and tucked the uncashed $2,000 check behind the final page. Then I wrote a single line beneath it, in my wife's old fountain pen. Forgiveness isn't a gift to them. It's a receipt that says paid in full. I closed the book, set it on the shelf beside Margaret's framed photo, and turned off the porch light. Tomorrow would be ordinary again. Bills to pay, roses to prune, coffee to make. And that's how justice should end. Quietly, faithfully, in the rhythm of honest days. As I climbed the stairs, I whispered one last thing to the empty hallway, more to myself than to anyone else. You can't steal what's already been earned. And for the first time since that glass door slammed behind me a year ago, I didn't look back.